International Coalition for Religious Freedom. He's a human rights activist, and he's going to give us a little background on the legal dimension of this issue.
My organization, the International Coalition for Religious Freedom, works for religious freedom for all people. I'd like to approach this problem more from a standpoint of international law and possible things that can be done to rectify the problem. UN Declaration of Human Rights, Article 18, everyone has the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. This right includes freedom to change his religion or belief, and freedom either alone or in community with others, and in public or private to manifest his religion or belief in teaching, practice, worship, and observance. There's also the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which is a formal treaty which has been signed by Japan, so they are officially committed to the principles of this covenant. And this echoes that document. In its Article 91 states a more basic right. Everyone has the right to liberty and security of person. No one shall be subjected to arbitrary arrest or detention. No one shall be deprived of his liberty except on such grounds and in accordance with such procedure as are established by law. The Article 18 of the UN document, everyone shall have the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. This right shall include freedom to have or to adopt a religion or belief of his choice, and freedom either individually or in community with others, etc. And point 2 of Article 18 is no one shall be subject to coercion which would impair his freedom to have or to adopt a religion or belief of his choice. So this right is very well established in international law, to which Japan is committed, at least in the letter of the law. Another article of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights is Article 23.2, the right of men and women of marriageable age to marry and to found a family shall be recognized. And this is relevant to several of the cases, and quite a few of the other cases that we've not only that we've talked about, but which we haven't talked about yet. This is Kiyomi Miyama. Hers is a case where she was held for more than 2 years. She agreed to give up her faith after 6 months, and she actually told me that she did renounce her faith sincerely at that time. But her captors would not let her go until she convinced them that her faith was broken, and took her to other victims and participated in their deprogramming. And she was also required to divorce her husband. Not only was she required to divorce her husband, but she had to stay in the apartment for the extra more than 2 years so that all the divorce proceedings could be finalized. There are many cases where people have been required to write letters of renunciation, which include that they renounce their marriage or their engagement to a fellow Unification Church member. So this is a relatively widespread human rights violation. Japanese law itself is not the problem. Japanese law is committed to uphold some of these principles. The Constitution of Japan says that freedom of religion is guaranteed to all. Article 220 of the Japanese Penal Code states, anyone who would arrest or confine other individuals unlawfully shall be subject to imprisonment. And Article 223 states, any person who, by intimidating another through a threat to another's life, body, or freedom, or hinders the other from exercising his or her rights, shall be punished by imprisonment. So the laws are there, but they're not being enforced. Let's look at some of the actions of the police and prosecutors. On my right, your left, is an actual picture of a person who was suffering confinement at the time. She's holding up a sign that says help. The police were aware of it, but they refused to liberate her. When her co-religionists got a lawyer involved and went to the place of confinement, she had already succumbed and gave up her faith. Takako Fujita is one of those cases where the police refused to help her husband find her. He came from Korea to try to find her and was given absolutely no help by the police. 4 months later, she committed suicide. You've heard some of the witnesses testify how they were depressed and how they even considered suicide. Well, this is a case of a person who, after 4 months being held as a prisoner by her own parents, finally gave up hope and actually killed herself. Kozue Tarada was a case where she was held and was able to smuggle out a note through the doorway, and someone reported it to the police. The police came to the door. She was screaming to be liberated, but the police were convinced by her parents that this is just a family discussion and left her alone. Soichiro Kobayashi was one of those who was kidnapped on multiple occasions. On one occasion, he was able to break the window, and the police came to investigate it. He was shouting and screaming to the neighbors. The police came and investigated and told him he had to cooperate with his parents. He was like 23 or 24 at the time. On another occasion, he was kidnapped again, and he escaped. He went to the police station for help. They brought him back to his confinement place. Doug can laugh because he's been through this. But it's not funny. It's not funny. Imagine what you would feel if you were finally got away from your captors and you went to the very people who are supposed to be upholding your rights, but instead of helping you, they put you back into that prison. Prosecutors have refused to indict the perpetrators. There have been many. I think there have been 20 cases where the victims have gone so far as to say, look, we've got to put a stop to this. I'm even willing to bring criminal charges against not only the faith breakers, but against my parents, because there's no hope of getting it done with just the faith breakers, because they're the agents of the parents. I'm going to sue I'm not only going to sue, I'm going to bring criminal charges against my family. And in no case did the prosecutors bring criminal charges. Mrs. Hiroko Tomizawa is a case where a stun gun was used against her pastor. She was in a church at the time. A stun gun was used against her pastor. Chains were used to break down the door, which was a glass door. People were injured in the process of her abduction. She was held for more than a year, or the prosecutors refused to bring criminal charges. Toru Goto, 12 years in prison, 12 years in a private apartment prison. He did not get out except one day to go to his father's funeral. The rest of the time, he did not breathe any fresh air. He did not have any exercise. And in the last 2 years, they punished him by giving him inadequate nutrition. They did not bring criminal charges despite his insistence that they do so. They did not, as Ichiko mentioned, they did not even investigate the situation. Rie Imari is another case where she was kidnapped. She was having dinner with her husband at a Denny's restaurant in Tokyo, and she was surrounded by a large number of men, and I think it was all men, who forced her into a van, kept her husband away, and they held her for several months. When she finally escaped, she brought charges, but they refused to bring an indictment. And there are many, many other cases. This is Mitsuko Antal. In her case, she and her husband brought charges against the perpetrators, and it went all the way to the Supreme Court of Japan. The court actually did find that she was confined and that this was a violation of the law. But it said that because the parents were motivated by their parental concern, this is just a family matter, and they weren't going to do anything about it. They weren't going to punish the parents. They weren't going to punish the person that attempted to break her faith. And they were not even going to enjoin the perpetrators from doing it again. despite being asked by her attorneys that they give this kind of injunctive relief. So she and her husband now live in America and have raised a happy family here in the United States, where we have better protections of civil and human rights. In other cases, as I've said, guilty verdicts often result in little punishments, and in other cases they have simply dismissed the issue as a family matter without even dealing with the facts of the case. We're very happy that GW Amnesty International has gotten involved. You're not a big organization. You have a powerful name, and even you, as students, can make an impact.
So I just want to thank everyone for coming out to our event today. Thank you to all of our speakers and to the survivors for coming and supporting us and sharing their stories. And I hope you guys enjoyed the event and took away something from it.